All right, let's dive right into one of the most foundational stories ever told. I mean, this is an escape that, by all accounts, should have been completely impossible. It's a story about being trapped, you've got a relentless army at your back, in this uncrossable sea in front of you, and it's all about how a path was forged to where there was, quite literally, no way to go.
And really, this is the question that just frames this entire thing. You've got certain death thundering right behind you, so why on earth would you choose what looks like certain suicide by walking straight into an ocean? I mean, it makes no sense, right? Well, the answer to that question, that's the whole point of this story.
Okay, so to really get why they made that choice, we have to understand who these people were in that exact moment. This wasn't some conquering army, not at all. These were people who were still, shaking off the chains of slavery. They were vulnerable. Their freedom was so new it was incredibly fragile. And they were marching headfirst into the complete unknown.
So right off the bat, we see this really crucial choice of path. See, they didn't take the easy way out. The shortest route, that would have taken them right past enemy territory. And the fear of another war, well, that probably would have sent them scrambling right back to Egypt, back to the misery they knew. So instead, they were led the long way around, deeper and deeper into the wilderness. It's a path that makes zero logical sense, but it forced them to completely rely on their guide.
And listen, they weren't traveling empty-handed. They carried these incredibly powerful symbols with them. First up, the bones of Joseph. Now this was about fulfilling an ancient oath, a promise that reminded them this wasn't just some desperate escape, it was a homecoming. And then you have these just incredible, constant miracles. A pillar of cloud by day to shield them from that brutal desert sun, and then a pillar of fire by night, like a lighthouse in a sea of black. It was this constant, visible sign that they were not alone.
But of course, just as that hope was starting to feel real, their past came roaring back to get them. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh's regret had festered and turned into pure rage. I mean, his pride, his power, his entire economy, it was all built on the backs of these people. He wasn't just having second thoughts, he was coming to take back what he considered his property.
So for the Israelites camped out there by the Red Sea, this was it. This was the moment their absolute worst fears came true. Just try to imagine it. The ground beneath your feet starts to tremble, and then, way out on the horizon, you see the glint of bronze helmets, and you hear the pounding of hooves getting louder and louder. That's the sound of the most feared army on the planet coming right for you.
And in that one moment, they just break. Completely. All that fragile hope, it just evaporates. Gone. And it's replaced by pure, uncut terror. They turn on Moses, and you can see that old slave mentality just comes surging right back. To them, it was better to die a familiar death back in Egypt than a new terrifying one out here. All of a sudden, this whole freedom thing felt like a sick joke.
So in this absolute moment of crisis, he's got panicked people on one side, an army on the other. Moses gets a command that sounds completely insane. Tell the Israelites to move forward. Forward? Forward where? Into the sea? It's a command that just defies every single ounce of logic.
And this, right here, is the pivot. This is where the story shifts from a desperate escape into a legendary miracle. It's that exact moment where total obedience to a command that makes no sense meets a completely supernatural event.
So here's how this miracle unfolds. First, Moses just lifts his staff, a simple act of faith. Then, this fierce east wind starts to scream, and it howls all night long. We're not talking about a gentle breeze here. This is a powerful, violent force. The water is literally driven back by some unseen hand, and right before their disbelieving eyes, a path of dry ground appears right in the middle of the sea.
I mean, can you even imagine the mix of sheer terror and absolute awe in that moment? They weren't just wading through a shallow sandbar, no. They were walking through a corridor with walls of water on both sides. Walls described as towering, dark, and trembling. It was as if the sea itself was holding its breath.
But what was the pathway to freedom for the Israelites is about to become something very, very different for the Egyptians. See, Pharaoh, he's just blinded by rage. He doesn't even hesitate. He orders his army to charge right into that same sea corridor. And the trap, well, it's about to spring shut.
And the contrast in here is just staggering. For the Israelites, the ground was dry. They were moving fast, driven by this incredible hope. But for the Egyptians, that very same path turned into thick, heavy mud. Their chariot wheels got stuck. The horses were screaming and panicking. Their so-called invincible war machine wasn't defeated in some glorious battle. It just completely unraveled in the mud.
And then,
Once the very last Israelite is safely on the other side, the end comes. Moses stretches out his hand one more time, and those towering walls of water just collapse. The sound is described as being like the sky splitting apart. It was this cataclysmic event that completely erased Pharaoh's army and all this power in one single decisive moment.
So, what happens now? They're safe, they made it to the other side, their enemies are just gone. But you see, this story isn't just about a great escape. The real heart of it is about what they learned, standing there on that shore, looking back at the water that had just saved them.
Well, the very first reaction is just this explosion of emotion. You've got sobs of relief from people who, minutes ago, were absolutely certain they were about to die. And then that relief just bursts into pure joy. Moses' sister, Miriam, she grabs a tambourine, and the women just start singing and dancing. And they're praising the one who saved them, not their own cleverness or strength.
And this brings us to the real takeaway of this whole thing. The lesson they learned on that beach wasn't just, whew, we escaped. It was a complete redefinition of what freedom even means. They discovered that true freedom isn't just the absence of your enemies. It's about belonging to and trusting the one who leads you right through the impossible.
But that powerful lesson, man, it gets put to the test almost immediately. The miracle's over, the singing has faded, and the desert is still there. You know, it's one thing to have faith when a sea literally splits open right in front of you. But the real question, the real test, is what happens next? What happens when your faith has to be measured not by a giant miracle, but by your trust in a scorching, endless desert?